Hi, good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're located. I want to say a warm welcome to everyone for joining the webinar today. We do still have a couple of people that look like they're still connecting, so I'm going to give it another minute or two. But while we're waiting for the rest of the attendees to jump on the call, I just wanted to say welcome again, to today's webinar. We'll be focusing on stories we tell, myths and legends of your teams, right? So first and foremost, my name is Nick. I am a project manager at the Fuse Base that is hosting this webinar. We, however, are thrilled to announce our speaker for today, which is Taras Fedoruk. He's a technical program manager at Bookings.com. He comes with a ton of unique insights into the power of storytelling in the corporate world. So, in terms of the rest of the session today, we'll explore how these myths and narratives that form within organizations can shape different dynamics, influence decision making, and build stronger and more resilient team cultures. So get ready for an engaging discussion on how the understanding of these stories can unlock new ways to drive success and innovation from within your teams. So I'd like to take a moment to welcome Taras again, but also to hand over to him as he'll be taking us through a few different some information around this and presentation around that. And then, there'll be a session afterwards. We'll be asking some, questions relating to, his topics of discussion, and we can take it from there. So, with no further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Taras.
Hi, hello, Nick. Thanks for having me here.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining.
Before I share my presentation, is it possible for me to turn on the camera for me?
Yeah, does it not allow you to?
No.
Are you able to do that now, Taras?
Yeah, much
Fantastic.
better. Thanks. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Um, Today, I would like to share one of the dearest topics to my heart, besides like being a very technical, related to daily um, daily tasks as a program manager. I really love to explore in the different cultures and understand how people can work with each other better. And in my personal humble opinion, there is no better tool for that than starting learning some concepts from the corporate anthropology. And this is what we will be exploring today together. Before we kick off, let me tell you a couple of stories about myself. The first story is about me as a professional, right? So I started my career in the project management in 2013 after I got a project management course in my university. So it ignited my passion for this field. And despite I always wanted to be an economist, I was fascinated by the idea of driving initiatives that have start and end, producing the unique results instead of boring operations that are repetitive every single day and week and month. So I started gaining required skills like project planning, working with the team and stuff. Sending my CVs after some cycles, I got a job. I was really happy. However, I was fired shortly after that, so I didn't pass the probation period. This lesson gave me the perspective of what I missed. And one of the foundings, for instance, was that I should not neglect learning English as a foreign language for me. So this understanding helped me to focus on what's really important for my career. And then I found another job and started a new journey full of new, awesome discoveries. Now, going further in 10 years, I have several accolades for what I do, including Best IT Project Manager in Ukraine, PMI Rising Leader Award, etc. So I think that my career goes exactly how how I envision it so far. That would be story number one. Let me land it properly in your ears. And we're going slowly to story number two. Since I was a kid, when I first read The Lord of the Rings, I always wanted to travel and explore new lands. I visited my first foreign country when I was 13. Then I started traveling with my girlfriend, now my wife. Once we were in France, and back then I had very limited experience with driving a car, and I almost got us killed on the road because I didn't plan my body well. And yeah, I ended up crashing our car and almost killed both of us. This near-death experience, how Ross Geller will call it, gave me the idea that I need to plan my travels more thoroughly and I need to prepare for them better. With this new approach to plans, 4 years after this incident, we managed to go to Norway by car from the Netherlands, back and forth, just like Hobbit did. It took us almost 2 weeks. We made 4,000 kilometers. And this photo is showing us, well, basically me, swimming through the beautiful fjord. Every travel that I take brings more perspective on the world around me and my place in it. So that concludes story number two. Now, if you will scan this QR code or go to slido.com and enter the ID, I would ask you anonymously, very simple question. Which story has touched you more? Which story resonated more with you personally? The first, the second, or maybe none? Let's take a couple minutes on that. Don't be shy. It is all anonymous, and I won't call you on explaining your opinion. And you cannot hurt me even if you say that none of the stories landed properly. All right. Maybe 30 seconds more. Great. And I'm especially grateful for those participants who voted for none, because it only helps me with the future narrative around this topic. So you can see that I explained my experience in two very different fields. And what happened is that some people liked the professional story about me because for any reason, starting from their mood today and ending with their, in general, professional focus on things, that story resonated better with them. For some people, well, for majority of the people, the second story resonated better because it was more live, more about me as a person rather than me as a boring management professional. But there are also people who didn't like both stories. And therefore, for now, for this first 5 minutes of the webinar, I didn't make any strong connection with them. You may see on this very simplistic example how stories that we're telling about them, about ourselves, help us building the meaningful connection with people or not, depending on how we select those stories and how we craft those stories. it becomes really important on joining a new team or starting the webinar with a room full of strangers. And also, I am a stranger for you too. So you are more in a defensive position subconsciously, and you're expecting me to prove myself to some extent. The whole idea of the corporate anthropology is really, really simple. Instead of inventing the new managerial practices, maybe it makes sense to take a look at how we worked before, or things that worked long before we started our life cycle on this planet. For ages, people solve conflicts, make decisions, survive through crises, rise and fall the empires and the small companies. It is all not new for us as human beings. As a matter of fact, different studies show that we work together in something that can be considered as a modern office for barely 400 years. But we live together as human beings for almost a million years in tribes, in cities, in countries. So instead of, again, reinventing the wheel constantly when we face some new challenge at work or in professional or personal life, it sometimes makes sense to take a look back. When we're talking about stories, one of the most powerful concepts about storytelling and the general stories is explained in Joseph Campbell's Hero Journey. The original book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces was published in 1948 and still is widely considered as the best book on the start about stories in people's world. So what is called the hero journey framework is a universal narrative pattern found in myth and stories across cultures around the world. You can see this pattern in books about Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, most of the sci-fi books and epics that you might like. So it all starts with the call to adventure, when the hero receives a call to embark on a quest or adventure. Usually it coincides with meeting the mentor, when the hero encounters the wise figure providing guidance and assistance, like Gandalf meets Bilbo, if you prefer The Hobbit, or when Gandalf shows up for Bilbo's birthday for The Lord of the Rings. But first, the hero rejects the call. They don't like to go there. They don't want to go there, because what it takes is that hero must leave the ordinary world and cross the threshold, enters this special world of the adventure. If we take a look again at the Lord of the Rings, that we might remember how Sam stood for a moment saying, oh, one step more and that would be the farthest I went from home ever in my life. And the next evening they would be attacked by Nazgul. Then there will be trials and failure, and the hero must grow new skills, but eventually the hero will enter the death and rebirth stage. This stage often represents metaphorical death and rebirth. Sometimes in some Greek mythology, for instance, we might see the actual death and then the actual rebirth from the death. It is a transformative moment where the hero undergoes a significant change, either in terms of their character, beliefs, or even the literal rebirth. The hero sheds the old self and emerges as a changed individual. And after that, the second half of this circle is actually the road back home. Revelation, atonement, finding the gift, something that he needs to bring back to the normal world, return changed, or sometimes it's called return with the elixir, something that they must bring back to the society. And then the journey ends. Many stories from ancient myth to modern firms, movies, companies cultivate the same hero journey template, mostly subconsciously. But this is something that we as human beings used to hear for generations and generations. Understanding the hero journey enhances our appreciation of storytelling as human experience. So, as we explore narratives, consider how the hero journey elements shape our connections to the character and the overall story. Specifically, what is or who is the hero of your story? The story of the leader in the team or organization is impacting everything else. Anthropologists usually say that this story wants to be told. Even if it's not told formally with words, it still resonates with the behavior and the culture and some hidden symbols in the organization. It is important to form the story about yourself before you join in the team, because this would be your tool to join the team or to start managing the team, or to put yourself against the team sometimes if it's needed. But it's also vital to form the story of the group, because then you can check whether there are similarities and contradictions. The idea, though, is that if you join a new group, I mean, the group existed before you join them, then it is expected that they do have their story already, and you need to hear it out and you need to understand it. Because then, for you as a leader, the question would be, how much are you going to be diluted in the group, or how much do you lose your story for the sake of the groups or companies? We might see this on LinkedIn pages when people, for the sake of their personal brand, put in their headlines the names of the previous companies. So they, to some extent, reject their personalities for the sake of having like X Google or X Amazon or X Microsoft in their headlines, meaning that this part of their story is more important than anything else. But we, as a independent reader or independent participant in the conversation, will be framed by that story in that specific way. Why myth matter? Well, first of all, myth are the very important tools to bring unity to the group of people. Stories create a shared sense of belonging to the group. Even in the same company, you may see how different teams crafting their own stories and myths can put themselves against the rest of the company, like this mentality which is called us versus them. And when you, for instance, make a lateral move from one department to another, you can experience absolutely different narratives within this group regarding what they're doing, how they're doing, what their past heroes were, and what they brought to their development as a team. Secondly, myth establish unspoken rules that everyone follows. Informally answering the statement, "This is how we do things." And then when you are interested in why we do things that way, namely you start challenging the status quo and you're interested in managing changes, then these stories about the past heroes would give you an idea of why things are happening that way and how you might change them future. And of course, motivation in general. These stories can inspire employees, providing motivation in challenging times, sparking innovation. All the myths that we liked to read being children or even adults, personally, I enjoy reading the mythology of different countries still, even being an adult. all the same myth you can find within your organization. I think you know about the Sisyphus myth, basically the story about ultimate punishment, right? So Sisyphus was cursed to endlessly roll this stone to the top of the mountain, only to see it fall back every time he's close to the top. But myth can be really different. They can be about the creation, for instance. So the company tells you the story about how it was created, who was the father or the mother of the company, how they came up with the idea, and why this organization strives as it is. The stories can be about close death. For instance, the stories like now many companies are telling stories about how they survived the COVID times, right? Some of them were really close to closure, to the bankruptcy even, but somehow they managed to survive. And this creates a brilliant story to tell the newcomers about how it was. Of course, myths are about heroes of the past. Previous directors, previous members of the teams, people who left some significant marks in the organizational history, starting from like the longest tenure and ending with the guy who created the funniest emojis in Slack. Traditions, laws, and unspoken rules are also the subject for myth explanation. So basically, we do the same in the organization. And myth starts from the significant events, key achievements, major challenges, and it builds the certain hierarchy from the top to bottom, and also from bottom to top when the team crafts the influences the story of the unit. The unit is influencing the story of the business department and up to the organizational level. These stories get passed down through team members and evolve with each and every retelling. However, leaders and influential team members often shape these narratives consciously or unconsciously. To give you an example, when we start working at a company, the very first thing that we are presented usually is graph like this one. It's called organigram, right? So we had sort of an idea about the hierarchy and who our boss is, and what is the ladder, and how it and how it looks, etc. So this is what we expect, right? If we put this into the language of corporate anthropology, we're talking about basically initiation, your initiation as a newcomer to a certain tribe. This is usually what we get. But reality, of course, is much more complex. And reality looks more like this, right? But nobody is telling us this. Nobody can show you this type of organigram and say, this is what you can refer to. This is your path, right? For some reasons, this story cannot be told, at least in verbs, right? In words, right? So we need to listen to stories. We need to keep our ears open to everything that is in between. Basically, the culture is everything that is in between people, not necessarily about any personality, but what connects them, what connects this group of people together. Organization-wide myth is something that you can hear a lot on the big events like all hands, town halls, and stuff like this. Most of the companies present it in a way that like, let's recap our mission, our vision. Let's take a look at our metrics, for instance, right? So you can even consider some of these metrics in some specific narratives as a sort of a god for this company, right? The god to whom they serve, they preach, but they also make sacrifices for. Then the team myth. And this is smaller, more intimate legends that impact day-to-day operation. This is more about who our leaders are, how we expect them to behave, comparing the current leaders with the past leaders. Some stories about how certain process elements came up to the map. And then, of course, it goes down to every person myth, but we are especially interested in the leaders myth, how leaders shape and live the stories they're telling about themselves to the group, to the team, or to the organization in general. There is no hierarchy in that. So every myth is influencing the others, creating the web of interconnected beliefs, both from top to bottom and from bottom to top. I really like this idea about explaining what the actual initiation, or how does it look like specifically, right? So when we are meeting the new people, right, we are starting with some memes and trying some jokes and trying basically to reveal ourselves, how we are like at home or with our friends. That helps us to identify who is cool and who to stay away from. Like, I work at the current company for 2 years and I'm still doing that from time to time, especially when I'm in the new groups on new programs. I try to experiment with the topics that are allowed or not allowed, try to understand why they're that way and what to do with that for me. These stories help us understand the relationships. What are the relationships in our group, between peers, with our managers? What is the type of relationship between leaders and authorities, right? I mean, we have a team lead of ours, but we also have their peers and their managers. What is the relationship with them? How we treat outsiders, people from other teams, from parallel teams, from other business units. What is our deal with the time and space? How we treat time and how we treat space. For that, a very popular story goes about some Surinamese tribe that once European anthropologists came to observe how they live. And they noticed that every day, the most mature and the most healthy men go out of the tribe territory to cut some trees, to chop them and to save them for evening's bonfire, for instance. After some time of observation, the European anthropologists offer them metal axes, and they say, you can use the metal axe and you can do your work. You can basically chop more wood in the same time. But what happened is that if before they worked for instance, 6 hours and then they have a rest, now they saved exactly the same amount of food, but just in like 2 hours instead of 6, and they rested the entire time after that. This story shows us how different cultures perceive time differently. In our culture, for instance, we tend to fulfill our time with something, right? If we are bored, it is like almost a crime in the modern world. This is why we have this term called FOMO, fear of missing out. Like, if we have spare time, then we're not doing enough, or we're not participating enough in the life of our tribe. But some cultures have the time as an entity that should not be fulfilled 100%. Instead, you can still do your job and have a meaningful rest time after that. So that's the example of the story about time and place. And of course, this is the stories about relationships with the relationships, like how we treat connections between other people. When you tell your story to the tribe, you inevitably put it against the tribe, and this is only the matter of whether you want to join them or you're going to join them, or you want to be a little bit aside. By any means, joining a new tribe means that you need to deal with so-called liminal space. Liminal space is literally the limbo, the transition period while you are not the part of this new team, this new tribe, but you're also no longer the part of your previous tribe, your previous company or the team. So you need to focus on finding your place. Nothing is more important than understanding how people work and live with each other. For instance, if you're a manager, then you tend to see processes, right? So this is your main focus. You see processes and how to optimize them, how to continuously improve them, etc. If you're a representative of a profession like psychologist or coach, for instance, then you see separate people, right? And you work with every single individual separately. But the anthropology is focusing on the group and applying the anthropologist way of thinking. You're looking for the spirit of this group, so everything that is in between. What can help you with that? Well, there are two lenses that you usually apply. It's ethic and emic perspective. Speaking about ethic perspective, it is the outsider or analytical perspective. It involves the examination of a culture using the concepts and categories that you derive from perspective of observer outside of the culture. So you call a certain things how you used to call them. The ethic approach aims for objectivity and comparability across different cultures. So when you come from company A to company B, you still tend to call some documents how you used to call them, or you call some events how you used to call them. Like some companies call big meetings like all hands. Some other companies call them town hall. Why is that? What is the difference between these terms? How these different tribes understand these different terms? This is all the example of how you apply the ethic perspective to your new team. A beautiful example of that is this article from Horace Minor, and it's called Body Rituals Among the Nakirema. It is a very old article from 1956. So in the American Anthropologist magazine, Horace Minor posted this article where he listed the set of disgusting rituals. For instance, the one example that I showed you on this slide is about the fact that Nakirema people have almost pathological horror of and fascination with their mouth, the condition of which is believed to have a supernatural influence on all social relationship. So they, for example, there is a ritual ablution of the mouth for children, which is supposed to improve their molar fiber. There is also another beautiful example of another ritual, which is which goes like this. So basically, almost all adult Nakirema people go to so-called listeners because all of them believed that they were all bewitched by their parents and they need to lift the curse. When you read this article, it looks really sometimes horrific. But the trick of this article is basically when you spell the word Nakirema backwards. I will give you 2 seconds to do that. And you might see that Nakirema spelling backwards means American. So what happened, what was the experiment of Horace Minor is to post an article in which he applied very specific language to describe the rituals of the people from America on the same time. The ritual on the slide is about cleaning their teeth and basically brushing their teeth. When they go to listeners because they believe that they were cursed by their parents, this is about going to psychotherapist, right? But applying this very specific vocabulary makes the reading really fascinating, and even, as I say, sometimes can horrify you. Another lens that you can apply is called emic perspective. And this refers to the insider or a native perspective. It involves understanding a culture from the internal point of view of it. So you speak to the members, you consider their beliefs, values, practices in their own terms. The emic approach seeks to grasp the cultural context from within, using the concept and categories meaningful for the people being studied. So this is the lens where you basically open your mind and you collect stories, anecdotes, things, micro stories, or the moment of cultural shock, something that you would never expect. But this is the way how you observe the culture, and basically you form the culture when you create unique answers for the universal questions. There is a huge list of so-called cultural universal terms, like for instance, the birth, the death, the initiation, taboo, religion, gods, myths, language, etc., etc. There are like tons of them. And going from one company to another company, from one team to another team, you should apply this lens to see how these groups of people give their unique answers to the very universal questions. To give you an example on that, I worked once for the company, and there was my time to leave this company. And on the exit interview, the HR manager told me, dude, this was your chance of the lifetime to work in our amazing company. If you leave now, you will never come back. This is an interesting way to explain the taboo of this company, and also to make it visible that one of the main values for this company is loyalty. Right? At some other companies, you may see that how people come and go because these companies are more open, and the relationship between people in those companies are more professional like, less, or maybe vice versa, more human like and less professional. So how to discover the myth of your team? First of all, interview team members to hear recurring stories. You talk to your people in formats of one-on-one meetings, or in group facilitation. Keep attention to the stories that they tell about the things that are going around this team. Who do they consider their enemies? Who do they consider their allies? What is the relationship between them and the management? What value do they bring to the rest of the organization? These are all important questions that you need to find through the stories. The second step, analyze team conversations and patterns in meetings, even if this is the one that you don't lead, even if this is the one that you just participate or you just listen in. This is the moment when you see what is happening between people in the group. And this is the moment when you see what happens between the group and the rest of the world. The third step is to identify shared experience or beliefs from onboarding, past achievements. This is the way to understand what type of beliefs unites this group together. Of course, our main tools on that way is reflection and critical thinking. Unfortunately, or fortunately, this is not math. So there are no ready-to-go recipes or very clear and nicely explained algorithms for you to find the myth of your team. You can be mistaken sometime, but what you should do is reflect and apply critical thinking to uncover and examine the hidden myth that influence your team, what is bothering them, and how you as a leader can influence that. At the end, I want you to think about this beautiful quote. It goes that we need less mercenaries and more missionaries. As leaders, as managers, we preach constantly. We display our values, we display our stories to the team and the rest of the organization in hope to shape these narratives. So we need less people who just do their job and leave it, and more missionaries who will preach about the importance of the organization, the importance of the product, and how we can become better for our better future. Thank you very much for your attention. If you are curious to continue the conversation or find some checklists, then you can go to the portal that I will show you later, where I put all the materials from this webinar, including some checklists like myth hierarchy, myth analysis, and storyboard for leaders, how you can create your own story as a leader, as well as the slides for this presentation. Thank you.
Fantastic. So firstly, from my side, I would like to just thank Taras for a great presentation. I thought it was really great that you shared some of your personal experiences, but also some really interesting and great insights around storytelling and how that can impact your teams. So we have got a few questions through the Q&A from the audience at this point. So I'd like to ask some of these questions. If anyone else in attendance would like to ask Taras any questions, we've got a few minutes where we'll do some Q&A now. So you can submit some questions in the QA at the function at the bottom of the screen. So yeah, so the first question we've got from one of our attendees that is anonymous is, hey Taras, we loved your talk. Which funny myths have you seen teams come up about with themselves essentially?
That's an interesting question. I wouldn't recall any funny myths necessarily. It's usually more like the stories about how proud they are about themselves, or vice versa, how pity they feel or something. So yes, I did start working with some teams whose basic myth about themselves is that we're just sad executors of top management wants and needs, and we have no right to share our opinion or no ideas to do that. So that's less about being funny and more about being rather sad, I would say. Just remember maybe stories about being particularly funny. I wouldn't say that this is a story about the team, but mostly about the certain personalities within the team. You may always find in a group of people, like when it's more than 5 or 7 people in the team, you can always find a person or two whose primary goal is not to deliver results, but rather to play as a glue for this team, right? So then if you consider them purely as a manager, like, oh, okay, the performance is low, so I would like to fire this person, but then the entire team falls apart.
Okay, fantastic. I mean that's some great insights. We've got a few more, so I'll be just trying to get through as many of these as possible. We will also try and follow up with the ones that we don't get to. So Jenny Austri, what tools can you use to shape these stories? So have you got any specific tools that you've used before or that you could recommend to the audience, Taras?
Yeah. My go-to instrument to shape your story is basically the hero's journey cycle that I showed you before. So on the portal that we will distribute among the participant, you will find the storyboards for leaders, and it contains the elements like, first of all, step number 1, who is the hero of your story? Who or what is the focus? Because it can be a person like yourself, for instance, if you craft a story about yourself, but it also can be something else, like a certain metric or a certain tool or a certain product. If you're working in a multi-product company, a certain product can be considered as a hero, and every other product is like not so cool, right? The second part is the setting. What is the context or environment in which the hero operates or lives? The third one is the conflict. What challenge or obstacle is faced and what should be overcome, right?
Okay.
For the past of some future. The fourth step is resolution, how you suggest the conflict resolved. And of course, every decent story should be finished with some moral. Like, what is the takeaway or lesson from this story that you can take, right? If you take a step back for the stories that I told you about myself, like I gave you two different stories, but both of them, despite being really different in the content, were really close to each other in terms of this storyboard, right? There was a hero, there was a setting, there was a conflict, there was a resolution, and some moral at the end. Think about how you usually behave on a job interview. You subconsciously might stay close to this narrative, but if you can be really focused on it, then you can polish your story and sharp it better. And then when you're asked any questions on the interview, or then when you are actually on board in the team, then you can easily just put several stories out of your pocket and tell them with some specific moral, right? Then you may be, eventually you can be considered as a like wise man who always telling stories instead of giving the direct answers, but that's like another dysfunction, I would say.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for that. That was really good and insightful. Got another question from Jenny in the audience. So she says that she's trying to wrap her head around this for her own team, right? So how do you spot the difference between a cool story and one that actually causing trouble?
Well, directly from the consequences. Basically, if we can get back to the previous question, for instance, right? The story usually ends with the moral, or at least it hangs the moral in the air for the people to consider it themselves. And if you see that the story promotes a behavior that you consider destructive or immoral, and when I say moral or immoral, I don't mean like the Bible type of moral, but the moral the moral which is moral or immoral for the values of your organization or the team, then you can basically understand that this story requires some attention. Because, for instance, just to give you really maybe a silly example, like you're in a big project that needs to report to the customers, but people refuse to put their hours in tracker or any time that they're spent, right? So you as a project manager have no information about what is going on. But then when you say like what happens, then you're like, yeah, but our management told us this is like non-value generating activity, right? So we thought that we would be allowed not to do that now. And then you need to basically, starting from the top, talking to your management, like, why do you give these signals to the people? Because then you will ask me about what is going on the project, and I have no clue at all, because I don't have any information about what's going on in my project, right? So you sit with your management, like, let's craft another story that would motivate people to do that. Like, let's explain why it's important. Let's put the data about the project performance, right, at the center stage of our story. Why it's important, how we get money out of it, etc., etc.
Okay, fantastic. That's really great. I think that's pretty good. We've got a couple of messages from left. One from Milana. So she starts off with saying thanks. She said it was really, a really great presentation to us. But as they work in a remote environment, sometimes, as you can imagine, this could leave the teams disconnected. So how do you keep the storytelling alive when everyone's kind of spread out around the globe, or different locations, essentially?
That gives you literally the very hard time as a manager and a leader, because there is no way for you just to casually observe people when they drink coffee or something that we usually call osmotic communication, right? When you just sit in the room and people are talking on the back, and you just hear some words, but this is how you digest some information unconsciously, right? So in that case, you need to create a specific points in time for the informal communication. For instance, when when the COVID hit
Hmm.
like 4 years ago, one of the things that I applied in the company that I worked back then was that I was opening a war room, basically just the empty Zoom call for 4 hours per day from from the parallel account, even on the parallel device. And I distributed the link to this Zoom call to the people in the main chat, saying everybody can join whenever they want with whatever topic, apart from the work. Like you're not allowed to discuss like projects or something like this. And people join
Hmm.
there like for drinks or to having lunch together, for instance, in the middle of the day. And that was the moment in time when you can still try to connect people with each other. For obvious reasons, people who are more introverted, they would rather enjoy the opportunity not to go anywhere. And of course, for them, you need to show some extra love and schedule some meetings, maybe for more uh, formal occasions, but still try
Hmm.
to keep in touch with them too.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, I know that's a big one with more and more teams becoming remote. So sure, those insights are valued. And then yeah, I think we've got time for about one more question. So there's a anonymous attendee that left a question. So they said that the missionary work that you were discussing may lead to burnouts for the team. And then in brackets, it says, or maybe I'm just not a great manager. But how to work with this in the context of the myths that you talked about, to manage that there's no burnout when doing the missionary type of work and so on.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah. So it says the missionary work usually leads to burnouts for the team. How to work? How do we work through this in the context of the myths that you talked about?
I understand.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I understand the question. While I disagree with it a little, because
Okay.
the missionary work that I'm talking about is more the responsibility of a leader. You are not necessarily expecting from anybody to do that or from everybody to do that. It's more about you as a leader, what you preach, what values you promote, what are the things that you reward for or punish for. But then,
Hmm.
obviously, if you need to in some projects or programs when you need to align with your work with other people with some other teams, then of course, and this it actually happens subconsciously when you pick basically an ambassador of your team to go to other teams, right? Yes, you do this mostly about skills, but we also should agree that mostly people skills go often hand in hand with the professional skills. So it's very
For
rare
sure.
case when you have a distinguished, for instance, engineer or architect in your team who has no skills whatsoever to talk to other people. And this
Hmm.
is about injecting in your culture in other teams' culture, right? So, for instance, you go there and you say, "Look, we, for instance, uh, how we work is that we embrace changes, right? And we react to
Okay.
changes gladly." And then another team can say, like, no, no, no. If you have a change, you need to fill up the form of 25 fields, and then we will have 5 business days to review this form, and only after that we can accept or reject the change, etc. Right? So that would be the clash of culture between two teams. But answering this
Okay.
specific, but answering this
Mhm.
specific question, yes, this is your job also to pick the ambassadors, but it's not
Mhm.
that like you expect that every single person in your team might be the missionary, although this is the ideal world to what we can strive for.
That's great, and I agree with that a lot. So I'd like to just end up by saying thank you to us. The presentation was amazing. I think it was really insightful, just based on the questions that we got. It seems that the audience was engaged, and then to all the attendees, thank you so much for attending. We really do value your inputs, your time, and we will get the on-demand version for this out to all of you at a later point. Once we've completed that. Outside of that, once again from FuseBase, thank you so much. We really appreciate everyone's time and everyone's input and involvement within this actual webinar. So from my side, I want to say thanks and goodbye to everyone. Okay, cheers. Bye bye.
Bye.